Welcome to the Introduction to REL Southeast State Longitudinal Data Systems presentation. We thank you for taking the time to participate and hope that this will prove to be a useful resource. This self-paced workshop is the first of a three-part series. The two other parts will cover developing research questions using an SLDS and the process of setting up an actionable research agenda for your alliance and your state. Researchers from the REL SE will be working with you throughout the entire process to help you build your research capacity. The purpose of this series is to help each state and research alliance develop a research agenda that leverages the data in your state's longitudinal data system, or SLDS. We hope to familiarize you with the nature, use, and power of an SLDS. Note that the emphasis is on using the data in your SLDS, and so we will not focus on research topics that would require collecting new data or using qualitative data that are not in an SLDS. By the end of the workshop series, we hope that you will have an increased understanding of why the federal government is investing so much into state longitudinal data systems and how they can be used to increase your ability to make data-driven decisions. Specifically, we want to help you understand the kinds of data your state collects and how research questions can be developed that take advantage of these systems. We will then work with you, your alliance, and others in your individual states to develop an actionable research agenda, that is, an agenda that can directly inform policy decisions. After all, ultimately, it is all about increasing your capacity to use data to inform and support policy. With that in mind, the workshop you are about to see is focused on explaining the role and use of state longitudinal data systems. The workshop is divided into three basic sections. In the first section, we explore what an SLDS is and how it differs from traditional administrative data systems. We then go over how the SLDS initiative came to exist and how they are funded. One key section is on data governance, which is designed to help you understand how you might access and use the SLDS in your state. In the second section, we examine the types of data commonly found in an SLDS. One of the key themes you will hear repeated is that an SLDS provides access to data from a variety of educational and non-educational sectors, such as early learning, K-12, higher education, and workforce. This is a key part of the power of an SLDS, and we will explore it in this section. Finally, we look at several examples of research and policy questions that can be answered using an SLDS. We hope these examples will give you a sense of the power of an SLDS and ideas for questions you may want to pursue through your research alliance or within your state. We wrap this section up with a discussion of some of the limitations associated with these kinds of data systems. A statewide longitudinal data system has two major defining characteristics. First, it is designed to track students, teachers, and others over time or from year to year. Second, it is designed to link data across sectors, that is, across multiple independent data systems. So an SLDS will follow a student as he or she moves from pre-K to K-12 and on to higher education or the workforce. Perhaps the easiest way to understand an SLDS is by contrast with a traditional data system. By traditional data system, we mean one that contains data for just one educational sector, such as K-12 or higher education, or even just one part of one section, such as teacher certification. Most of these kinds of systems were originally designed to handle reporting and compliance tasks, such as ensuring teachers are certified or reporting program participation. They typically handle each year of data one at a time, and so they are not designed to track people over time. They also contain dozens or hundreds of data elements, everything needed to manage the program. But an SLDS is different. They are linked across years. Each time new data are entered in the system, they are automatically linked to prior years so that information about a student or teacher or school can be tracked over time. An SLDS is built to handle data from multiple sectors, with each participant tracked as they move from one sector to another, which is why you may see an SLDS referred to as P through 20W. This tracking capacity means we can see how program participants perform in later years, whether that is tracking pre-K participants or high school and college graduates. The data in an SLDS tends to be stable because it has been finalized by the original source sector. But the SLDS may not get every piece of data collected. Often, each SLDS receives a subset of selected data elements. So typically, an SLDS may not duplicate the original system, but take only part of it. Even so, the SLDS expands on the capacity of the original system by tracking data over time and linking it to other data from other systems. Many of the most critical questions require linking data across sectors and following students as they progress through the educational process. In some states, for example, individual programs have their own data systems that operate independently. When this happens, even data within a single sector may not be linked. So an SLDS brings key data together in one place and tracks students and teachers over time. Why do we need an SLDS? All of our states have been collecting, reporting, and analyzing data for years. So why all of the recent interest in creating statewide longitudinal systems? The simple answer is that there are many research and policy questions that cannot be answered using traditional administrative data systems. For example, would you like to know whether participation in your state's pre-K improves student outcomes in 3rd grade, or how well your graduates are doing in the workplace? These are just 2 examples, but there are potentially hundreds of questions that cannot be answered by a traditional data system because they require tracking students over time and across sectors or programs, from pre-K to K-12 to higher education to the workforce. Hopefully, from the comparison to a traditional data system, you can get a sense of what an SLDS is and does. It is designed specifically to manage data across sectors and programs in time. Students, teachers, and other kinds of participants are linked through an identification number that is usually created by the system itself. This enables researchers and program staff to ask questions about what happens to people who transition from one sector to another, or what happens to them over time. An SLDS also makes it easier to produce regular cross-sector reports that bring to light key outcomes. Moreover, the simple act of making the data more accessible increases transparency and accountability. The federal government has invested significant resources in longitudinal data systems because of their potential as a tool to inform policy discussions and help improve policy, particularly with regards to improving student performance. Data on how students perform at the next educational level can be used to understand the kinds of challenges faced by teachers and students. For example, data on high school graduates who go to college might show the kinds of subjects and courses students struggle with at the next level, and that can be used to reform high school programs. The national effort to support states in developing their longitudinal data systems began in earnest in 2005 as a program within the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences. The program was expanded over the next few years as funds were added from various stimulus grants. The total grant funds provided and the purposes for those grants have varied over the years. The 2006 and 2007 competitions focused on trying to support states in bringing all of their separate K-12 systems together and developing the longitudinal nature of their systems. There were 27 grants with a total of $112 million. In 2009, there was a 3rd round of competition that focused on bringing at least one new sector into the state's longitudinal system. Alternatively, a state could be funded to develop the technology to link teachers and students, which is a prerequisite for measuring teacher effects on student learning gains. That same year, there was another round of funding for states with more developed systems so that they could bring in all 3 external data sources and develop a teacher-student link. A total of $400 million was available during 2009. The 2012 funding was designed as a follow-up to the initial 2009 grants and supported states in adding another sector to their SLDS. In all, the federal government provided almost $600 million in funds to help states develop longitudinal cross-sector systems. As of 2013, 47 states have received 1 or more grants to support building an SLDS. Across the REL southeastern states, Georgia has received 1 grant, Florida 3, North Carolina 2, Mississippi 2, and South Carolina 2. Each state in our region has moved forward in developing its SLDS, although at different paces. Each has K-12 data available in their system, and several now have 4 P-20W data. A number of them began improving their data systems even before the SLDS program. With the increases in funding, the pace of change picked up. A significant amount of money is being dispersed in a short period of time, and so things are happening quickly. In addition, they continually revise their goals and priorities based on changing needs. The SLDS program has its roots in the America Competes Act, which identifies 12 key elements for an SLDS. These can be seen as the fundamental elements of an SLDS. Some states have gone beyond these elements, such as by including data from workforce programs. But the 12 elements still provide a good foundation for understanding the basic structure of an SLDS. State longitudinal data systems use unique identifiers that protect individual identities. This is typically done by assigning a new SLDS-specific identifier that is not the Social Security number, which helps protect privacy for students and staff members. As mentioned previously, an SLDS may not have every data element on every student and staff member. Instead, they sometimes have selected key information such as student enrollment, demographics, and valuable transition information, including transfers, dropout dates, and graduation dates. The systems will also track student performance data for tests that are used in federal and state accountability systems. This helps to facilitate research needed to eliminate achievement gaps and improve learning of all students. An effective SLDS will also have information on students who are not tested and on college readiness. It will link teachers to students and include transcript data. Finally, an SLDS will have data on K-12 students who have moved into post-secondary education. As you can see, a good SLDS will have a wide array of data going back 5 or more years and be structured so that policymakers and researchers can look at how programs impact students and how students perform from pre-K through the workforce. One critical issue for an SLDS is data governance. While governance applies to any data system, it is much more critical for an SLDS than it is for traditional systems. Data governance encompasses the various policies and procedures that determine who can access the data and for what reasons. For example, higher education officials will want input over how K-12 staff use the post-secondary data. That input is part of data governance. Data governance pulls together all of the policies around how the data are managed, who can edit or change the data, and how they are handled and reported. It is the who, what, when, and how of data. Who controls the data, what is available for sharing, when it is available, and how it can be accessed. Typically, data governance, even if it is not called that in your organization, is both a process and structure. It is a structure for managing data, the organizational units and staff who collect, share, and report the data, but is also a process that organizes the way data are accessed and used. While this workshop series will not describe the governance of each of your states, it is critical for you to understand your local context so that you can take advantage of the available resources. With a traditional system, especially a relatively specific one like teacher certification, there are not a lot of people from the outside wanting to use the data. But the nature of an SLDS is that it offers access to data from sources that a program person might not have been able to access previously. So interest in using the data and the potential number of uses is much greater with an SLDS. In addition, since the SLDS contains data from multiple sources, the people responsible for providing those data have a right to ensure they are not misused. There are some key questions that might help you understand your local data governance situation. Who are the staff that collect the data? This will begin with the source systems, but there will also typically be a specialized office or unit that takes the data from the other systems and converts it for use in the SLDS. Who are the staff that manage access to the data, and what are the policies about what data are available and how they can be accessed? Often, sectors outside of K-12 want input on who is using their data and how they are using them. That might include receiving permission for using the data. You need to find out the restrictions on SLDS use in your state. Similarly, often as part of the data sharing arrangement, limits are placed on the allowable uses of the data, such as the requirements on users for maintaining confidentiality and limits for sharing results prior to their release. Data governance roles within a state agency may vary. Typically, an information technology team or other data group manages the process of receiving the data from the source sectors, cleaning the data, organizing them, and loading them to the SLDS. The program area staff have access for administrative purposes such as reporting, but also for program evaluation and improvement. The executive leadership provides overall agency direction and goals, which in turn drive the policy questions asked and the data used. While the terms and structure may vary across states, the basic roles are likely to be pretty similar. Knowing your role and how you can interact with your SLDS will be key to making the best use of your data for improving policy and practice. Some states have a written guide for the governance of their SLDS. Sometimes the guide is posted on the state agency's internet site, so you may want to ask if that is available. As we have seen, one of the major goals of the SLDS program is to create systems of data from pre-K through workforce. This is often referred to as a P through 20W system. In this section of the presentation, we take a look at some of the common data elements included from the various source sectors. Early learning can be far more than just pre-K, although sometimes only pre-K is included. A strong early learning data system often includes data from early Head Start, public and private child care providers, and more. These kinds of systems do not often have assessment data, but simply knowing a child participated in a program is often the major point. Researchers and policymakers can look at program participation to help decide if the programs are efficacious or to consider possible changes to the programs. K through 12 is typically the main foundation for an SLDS. Most of the students will come from K through 12, as will most of the data elements. It is important to remember that the data can vary quite a lot. Schools can be public or private, they can be magnets or charter schools, and there can be multiple grade configurations. But most K through 12 systems can provide descriptive details about the nature of each school. K through 12 data systems, as discussed previously, typically have demographic, assessment, and attendance data, along with transcripts and other information. But states are increasing the amount of staff and other data collected. Staff data typically includes teacher credentials, experience, training, and salaries. As already noted, teachers are often linked to individual students and sometimes classrooms. In addition, many states are collecting data on facilities and administrative staff. There are a variety of source systems at the post-secondary level. These range from adult education programs to technical education to 2- and 4-year colleges and universities. Some states are even collecting data from private colleges and universities. The types of data collected will vary, but typically include the institutions attended, program participation, courses and grades, and financial aid. The most common type of workforce data comes from unemployment insurance records. These make it possible to get quarterly wages and some information about the industry classification. But workforce data can be much more extensive. States offer an array of workforce training programs aimed to assist people in finding jobs or upgrading their skills. So many states are able to include these kinds of data in their SLDS. As mentioned previously, progress in pulling the diverse kinds of data together in an SLDS has varied across the nation. 33 states have or are working on including early childhood data, 39 have or are working on incorporating post-secondary data, and 10 have or are working on including workforce data. One of the major limitations of workforce data is that unemployment records require a social security number, and not all education systems collect that. Pre-K, K through 12, higher education, and workforce data are not the only potential types of data that could be used in an SLDS. Though not necessarily covered by their federal grants, some states collect military, corrections, and other data. Health data, especially birth certificates, can be a great source of information about a child's early life, as can data from many human service organizations. There is a federal initiative to link federal U.S. Census and Department of Labor data so that workforce data can be tracked outside of a given state. So the potential number and range of questions for an SLDS is only going to grow, within a state and linking across states. In this section, we share some examples of research and policy questions that could be addressed using an SLDS. These are just examples, but hopefully they will give you a sense of the potential for using your SLDS to drive policy decisions. Later, we will work with you to develop similar questions specific to your policy areas. With pre-K a major topic at both the state and federal level, One of the most common questions that comes up is whether children who participate in state-funded pre-K do better in school than children who do not. This kind of question is ideally suited to an SLDS because not only is it longitudinal, but it crosses two sectors that traditionally have not been linked. In many states, answering this question has been almost impossible because there has not been an identified number across sectors for each child that can be used to track that child. But if your state has brought early childhood data into its SLDS, then you will be able to answer this question, either by following a cohort from pre-K through 3rd grade, or by looking retrospectively at current 3rd graders and finding their pre-K participation. With the ongoing interest in high school graduation rates, asking about future learning for middle and high school students can begin a discussion about where and potentially why students end their education. There is a lot of power in quantifying how many students do not graduate high school, how many graduate but do not enroll at a post-secondary institution, and how many that do continue their education complete it. It raises questions of high school preparation, guidance and counseling, as well as concerns around financial aid policies and accessibility. An analysis answering the question, how many of your current 8th graders are likely to get a post-secondary degree or credential, can inform many discussions. But answering this question is difficult without an SLDS. It requires many years of data, 10 to 12 depending on how long you want to allow for completion of a college or university degree. It also requires data from several educational sectors, K through 12, adult and technical education, community colleges, and 4-year colleges and universities. As we saw earlier, most states are bringing post-secondary into their SLDS, and once enough years of data are included, they will be able to conduct analyses to seek answers and make informed decisions. While education has many purposes and benefits, one of the most fundamental is its link to better employment and wages. If your state has brought workforce data into its SLDS, you will have the ability to track students after high school and into the workforce to look at that link. Analyses needed to do this typically track students for several years and then report annual earnings. The results can be broken out by highest degree or credential earned. In addition to data on wages, if public assistance data are available, you can also look to the extent to which graduates are self-sustaining. This kind of information is often of great interest to legislators. Absenteeism has become a major topic thanks in part to recent research from the Consortium on Chicago School Research that showed it to be a major predictor of future success. Analyses to answer questions about absenteeism could be done in your states. Some analyses, such as finding the impact of chronic absenteeism on high school graduation rates or academic achievement, do not require cross-sector data, but they do need the kind of longitudinal tracking of students that is facilitated by an SLDS. You can also see how your SLDS might be used to look at dropout programs, Algebra 1 participation, and hopefully many more questions. However, all data systems suffer limitations, and an SLDS is no exception. It is important to understand and consider the data challenges you may encounter with your SLDS when developing research questions or using their results. One potential weakness for all data systems is the quality of the data itself. Data elements that are not related to critical functions are sometimes not a top priority for completion by staff at the local level. With limited time and staffing, data elements associated with funding allocations or accountability results often receive the most attention, and the quality of other data elements can falter. For example, enrollment data are typically very high quality, but something like post-secondary plans or participation in extracurricular activities might be poorly captured in the database. A data element cannot be used just because it exists in the database. It is important to understand whether it is reliably collected and reported. Another concern is that administrative data are designed for a specific purpose and may not fit the research question. Attendance is often seen as a strong predictor of future performance, but someone who wants to study attendance patterns might not be able to if, for example, attendance is recorded during a survey period twice a year instead of daily. In addition, the definitions of a data element could change significantly over time. A data element that has been collected for 10 years may not mean the same thing today that it meant when it was created. As a result, older data may not match newer data, making following trends difficult. Similarly, a data element might not reflect what you expect. Understanding the definition of the data element and why it was collected can be very important. For example, a graduation data element may be collected to identify students advancing to the next grade, rather than when the student completes their education at that school. Using that data element to determine graduation rates may not result in what is expected. Sometimes the element means something else or is just not as clear as it might appear. For example, the North American Industry Classification System, NAICS code, is sometimes used to look at the types of fields graduates go into, but the NAICS code reports the classification of the employer, and many large employers have so many different kinds of jobs that its classification is not that relevant or accurate for individuals within the company. A graduate in accounting who gets a finance position at Walmart might be classified as working in retail and incorrectly determined to be working out a field when in fact the graduate is actually working in their field. There are times when a state might not collect individual level data and instead collect only aggregated information. This might be done to reduce the data collection costs, or it might be done to protect privacy. But regardless of the reason, it can have an effect on research if the question requires a different level of data. As mentioned previously, an SLDS may not receive all of the data from a given sector. Because of the time, resources, and costs associated with managing large data systems, each SLDS designer must decide which data elements from the various source systems to include. This is typically based on the planned uses of the SLDS. Therefore, it is possible that a data element needed to answer a specific question is not in the SLDS. However, the data might be housed elsewhere in the state, but not in a form or system that allows access or linkages to other data elements. Another consideration is the possible lag time between when data are collected and when they are made available in an SLDS. In some states, the process of moving data from the administrative system to the SLDS can take 6 months to a year. That can potentially make the data less relevant. Many states are working diligently to solve this by having real-time data in their SLDS. From a practical perspective, unless there has been a major policy change, data from 2 years ago may still be valid. But if something has changed in the intervening years, then the data may no longer be relevant, or they may just not be politically acceptable if they are too old. Even if the data are available and usable, it is possible there will not be staff available with requisite skills to conduct the analyses needed to answer the research question. There are also practical considerations, such as the legal limitations to the use of the data. The original source systems have some level of ownership, as described earlier, and they may not want to share or may be prohibited in some cases. The time and effort to pull the data together is another practical limitation. It takes staff time to get the data out of the SLDS, and when there are more requests than available time, prioritizing responses can be a challenge. Some states are addressing this by developing portals to provide program staff and researchers with direct access to the SLDS. These portals generally provide some basic data with some broad linkages. As the SLDS is sustained in your state and continues to change based on state needs, more and more data will likely be readily available. Significant funds have been invested in developing each state's SLDS, but there are ongoing costs that require funding and political support. If state leaders do not care to use the results of the SLDS, do not want to fund it, or can't get the answers they seek to key questions, then the SLDS will wither and die. Similarly, if key stakeholders oppose using the SLDS, then its utility can be greatly diminished. And, of course, as stakeholders change, so might support for the SLDS. If an SLDS champion leaves, then you may see the SLDS lose funding, support, and attention. So developing an SLDS is just one step, a necessary but not sufficient one. Each state must find reasons to use their SLDS, ideally by asking key policy questions and applying the results to make better policy decisions. Here we provide a quick checklist of key questions you should ask as you plan to conduct research using your state's SLDS. We wrap up by highlighting a few key points. If your state's SLDS becomes simply a reporting tool for federal and state compliance, then much of the millions invested will have been lost. The SLDS program was designed to make it possible to answer questions that could not be answered with traditional administrative data systems, and for those answers to help improve policy. For your SLDS to succeed, it requires people like you to develop useful questions that leverage the longitudinal and cross-sector nature of the system, and to use those answers in policymaking. We will talk more later about the designs of the SLDS in your particular states, but the design is less important than the users who determine whether the system is relevant. There are a number of resources that you might find useful if you are looking for more information about the SLDS grant program or data use in general, such as the National Center for Education Statistics, other government entities, and private organizations such as the Data Quality Campaign. Thank you for your attention and participation in this workshop. The second workshop will follow in the next few weeks and will be about using your state's SLDS for research. The workshop will be used to set the stage for a discussion about research questions you may want to see answered by your research alliance or state.